What is up? All right, you guys will love this interview. I know I loved speaking with him. As you can find him on Instagram and YouTube, Sir William Goes. He is the embodiment of overlanding to the core of just pleasure and just having fun, being out there, enjoying the wild, enjoying where he is, enjoying the people he's with, and just taking his time to take it all in, to take the views in, to sit and enjoy himself. I know that I'm looking forward to making my own pair of Air Jesuses. If you want to know what those are, you got to listen. The first video I ever saw of him was him basically trolling the overland world, trolling his own community and showing that you don't need all the fancy things. And just because you don't have those fancy things doesn't mean that you are not an overlander. So yeah, listen, enjoy it. It was an absolute blast. He's just a very funny and genuine human being. So yeah, enjoy the interview. Let me know what you guys think. Comment, share, all that good stuff. And first, our sponsors. I want to thank Pour Off-Road Coffee Company for sponsoring us, for being a part of this adventure with us, for making these morning coffee talks, or whatever I'm going to call them, possible, and making an absolutely gangster cup of coffee that I get to have every morning and afternoon, and sometimes I have it in the evening as well. But yeah, thank you to Pour Off-Road Coffee Company. You guys are amazing. Veteran-owned. I want some coffee. Veteran-owned coffee company. They give back to the community. They always have some sort of giveaway, some sort of promotion on the go. So hit that link down below. Go check them out. Get yourself a bag of coffee. Tag me in it, tag them in it. Let us know what it's like, because I'll tell you what, I love my coffee throughout the day pretty much, and I drink a shit ton of it, and it's delicious. So check them out. Pour Off-Road Coffee Company. Thanks again. Man, I've been following you since your I'm Not an Overlander video, part 1.
Okay. All right. So yeah, so a little bit of background. I've been traveling all across the country since 2016. I've done 2 trips to the Trans-America Trail from North Carolina to Oregon. The first trip I did solo. The second trip I did with my girlfriend. I don't know if you're familiar with the Trans-America Trail, but it's about 8% off-road from North Carolina to Oregon.
I think I was talking to somebody with that one yesterday. It's almost just a dirt road, like a trail essentially, from west to east, right?
Yeah. You do it from east to west typically, but it's kind of a combination. It's not one single trail. It's kind of a combination of various different trails and different BDRs and different country roads and stuff like that. But you never get on the interstate. It's made for dual sport bikes.
Yeah, that's what they had mentioned. But it can fit the off-road vehicle.
It can fit, a normal size vehicle. The guy that created it said he did it in his Tahoe. So.
Oh, all right. Well, that's relatively large enough vehicle.
Yeah, it's not a real hard trail. The hard part comes with, just doing it all at one time. You'll see a lot of people do different segments of it, and they'll take, a couple weeks to do a segment here and a couple weeks to do a segment there. And that's not really, there's nothing tough about the trail. The actual tough part is taking the full month to do it.
Well, I mean, so you've been on the road full time since 2016.
Now, I've been on the road full time since 2020.
Okay.
Prior to that, I would take, a couple months off at a time and go do. I've done all kinds of different. I did that trail. I've done all kinds of different. I don't know if you've heard of these adventure routes and backcountry discovery routes.
No.
But they're basically off-road trails that loop around different states. So I've done one in Georgia. I've done one in South Carolina. I've done one in Kentucky. One in Oklahoma. I've done Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, parts of Nevada, and parts of California. And
just out of the Forerunner and just trying to find the warmer places to stay. And
that's it, yeah, in the Forerunner. So in 2020, I started full-time and I was hauling a 21-foot travel trailer with a Tundra and following along in my 4Runner. So the idea was we'd set up the travel trailer in different spots, and then hang on one second here. Let me on a call. So I'd set up the travel trailer in different spots and then go out from there for a week or two at a time. So set up in like Yellowstone, set up outside of Glacier, set up outside Dallas Fort Worth, set outside of Moab, and different things like that. So I did that from 2020 till latter 2021, and then in January of 2022, I got into the back of the 4Runner, and I've been in the back of 4Runner since then.
So how do I say the question? Like what is your drive essentially? Because I mean, you're living full time out of a 4Runner in these, like, obviously from where you're sitting right now, these beautiful spots in nature, just enjoying life and because you're working out of the 4Runner as well, or how's that work?
Yeah, so most of my work consists of just creating content for YouTube, working for different companies, different things like that. I'll go to different shows, like the Overland Expo shows, and sometimes I'll work at those, whether or not it be with a company or another media deal. And but yeah, man, it's just basically just seeing what I could see, man, going and exploring new places. I really enjoy just off-roading and pushing the truck to its limits and pushing myself and the truck to its limits. So, I'll go find some, gnarly area somewhere and then go check it out. And the goal is to just be able to conquer anything that I come across while I'm out here within reason.
So how do you keep from, like, because right now you're solo, how do you
Yeah.
not get into some sticky situations, or have you gotten into some spicy situations on your own?
Yeah, I've gotten into some pretty spicy ones. My first time on the Transamerica Trail, I got stuck on a mountain in about 3 foot of snow for almost 3 days,
Cool.
and then I got stuck on the beach in Oregon that same trip. While I was on the Kentucky Adventure Trail, I actually got attacked by a dog,
Awesome.
and then yeah, and then after getting attacked by the dog, I fell down into the side of a mountain and was stuck on the side of that mountain for a little while. I
Like,
was able to just kind of get my way out. But
you and the rig fell down, or you fell down?
yeah, so what it was Kentucky's actually some pretty gnarly wheeling, man. It's some of the worst out there, I would say. A lot of people, whenever they think of off road, they think of Moab and they think of the Rubicon and stuff like that, but in reality, the Southeast, in my opinion, has got some of the hardest off-roading out there. And particularly whenever it gets to where it's raining. And most of that area in the Appalachians is all rainforest. So that area gets a lot of rains, upwards of 40 to 45 inches per year.
Jesus.
And so I was traveling along a trail that was just real, real sloppy and muddy. And that was when I actually learned that, at the time I was in a stock rig. I've been in a stock rig for pretty much all my adventures that I've done has been in a stock rig. I didn't get a suspension lift and tires until last year.
Oh, wow.
And no winch, no nothing like that. I had traction boards, but that was about it. And in that particular case, what I did was I tried to get up onto the ruts, and the ruts were down in there. So I tried to kind of get over and to where I was on top of them and not in the rut, because the ground clearance, so they were just, 35s and 37s come through there and just tear it up. And what happened was I just fell down into those ruts. And whenever I fell down into the ruts, and I actually fell down into the side of the mountain. So the mountain come down like this, and there was a big rut there, a big rut here, and a big rut here. And I was trying to just kind of hover in the middle, and it didn't work out. And what I learned from that was, one, a winch is an invaluable piece of equipment. And two, don't try to ride above the ruts. Just ride in the ruts and hope for the best.
So what do they say? You want to go where the water flows, or something along those lines?
Basically, yeah, basically. And that's pretty much what I learned there.
I feel like that's a pretty good lesson. with
Yeah.
minimal consequence.
Yeah, for sure. And that was all that's all documented actually. That whole situation was all documented. I was able to catch that one pretty good on YouTube on a video there.
So what are your social media handles? Where do people find you? Where, YouTube, Instagram, what else you got
Yeah,
going on?
so it's all Sir William Goes. So YouTube, Instagram. I've got Twitter, or I guess X now, but I don't use it much. But mainly just the YouTube and Instagram is basically the only things that I really stay up on.
So were you a content creator first and then fell in love with adventure and 4x4 overland stuff, or were you overlanding 4x4 and then you're like, well, I can make some good content, and then you started pumping out some videos and stuff like that?
Yeah, so kind of both. Back, when I had a real job, a grown-up job, I worked for Southeast Toyota and worked for a couple different dealerships in the Southeast Toyota jurisdiction there. And what I did was I used to teach car dealerships how to sell cars online. And the way that I did that was through video. And so I was familiar with making videos and familiar with creating content, so to speak. But then I was in a motorcycle wreck, and whenever I got in that motorcycle wreck, I had lost a good portion of my memory.
No
And so
way.
I decided to take my trip, and whenever I wanted to take my trip, I said, well, I'm going to video my trip so that way if my memory doesn't come back or gets worse, then, at least I'll have it. And so I, recorded it and put it up all on YouTube so that way I could go back for it later. And people started liking the videos and following along and, telling me their inspirational stories based off of the videos that they watched of mine. So from there, I just kept on making content.
Man, that's awesome. Because I mean, you, like I said, like the first video that I seen of yours, because we just discovered overlanding in like April. We were living in Mexico,
Right.
and then we discovered overlanding, and we're like, hey, you want to, for our first ever camping trip, drive from Alaska to Argentina and zigzag through the States and Canada and Mexico and South America. And we're like, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. So then I kind of dove into the world of overlanding. And I found your video, I'm Not an Overlander Part 1. And it had me laughing pretty hard. And I was like, man, I like what he's doing, because it's completely different from everybody else and almost trolling the standard overlanding like culture.
Yeah. So when I first, I was working for Toyota when I first came across the term overlanding. And the way that I came across it was I was a new car manager at a Toyota dealership, and I couldn't. I wanted to upfit some trucks for the lot, and back then it was kind of hard to find. It was kind of hard to find anybody. Everybody was doing like these 6-inch lift stuff, and I was like, well, that's not really feasible. Because off-roading, I knew about off-roading, and I'd been off-roading, and I knew that a 6-inch lift wasn't really feasible. It really wasn't going to be a good one to make the truck usable. And so I came across the term overlanding and expedition vehicles. And whenever I started looking into it, I was like, well, this is what I'm looking for. This is how I'm trying to upfit these vehicles. And in that, I came across this forum called Expedition Portal that kind of introduced me to the world of overlanding. And there's a section on that forum called In Progress Adventures. And in that, there was a guy traveling around in a Toyota Tacoma with like a 3-inch lift and a camper shell on the back. And he was going all across the United States and hitting off-road trails and hitting mountain bike trails. And he took his dog and his mountain bike with him. And he was writing about his journey. And every day he would update that little piece there with pictures and all that of where he was for that day. And I remember just being in awe at it, and I was like, man, I got to do this one day. And that was back in like 2010, 2011. And so I started Google Maps. I'd started plotting out places that I wanted to see that I was eventually going to go to. And then 2015, I'd gotten laid off from a large auto dealer group and went to go sell cars. And a lady that I had helped out came in looking for a Toyota Tacoma, and told me that, she had taken this trip across the U.S. in one, and she loved that truck. And she brought in a scrapbook, man, that was about that thick whenever she took delivery of her car. And we went through the scrapbook for like 2 hours and I was just blown away by all the cool stuff she had seen. And, I told her, I said, well, you've inspired me. I'm going to take my trip. I've been talking about this trip now for 4 or 5 years. I'm going to finally take this trip. So I had planned on taking it in September of 2016. So September of 2016 was the goal. And right around that same time, I had a buddy call up and told me he needed a finance manager at a Land Rover dealership. So I went to the Land Rover dealership, and then they did a special on the Transamerica Trail. Land Rover did a big thing with this guy, and they sent 3 new Land Rovers on this Transamerica Trail. And I was like, well, damn, if they could take those Land Rovers on that trail, I know I could take a 4Runner on those trails. So I went and got I had a Toyota Tundra that I had set up for going across the desert at 90 miles an hour. That was the only goal that I had. And I said, well, this isn't going to be real practical to take across the United States because it only got like 9 miles to the gallon with 34s on it and mid-travel set up, and it just wasn't feasible. So I traded it in, got a 4Runner, and then started planning on doing the Transamerica Trail. And in March, I got in that motorcycle wreck. And once I got in that motorcycle wreck, I was in the hospital. And I said, you know what? Now's a better time than ever. I'm just going to go ahead and take my trip as soon as I get out of the hospital. So in April of 2016, I took the trip on the Transamerica Trail. Man, I always tell people, I always say it changed my life. Some people say, things that they've done have ruined them. Ruined their life, and I wouldn't say it ruined my life as much as it changed it for it might be good, it might be bad, it depends on who you ask, but I decided from that point on that life was a whole lot more than just dealing with the chasing the dollar and kind of being stuck in that matrix. And from then on, I had started working towards just getting out here and living full time, man.
I love that. The whole thing. It's I had no idea that you were in the car industry before, and that's what I left when in 2021 I was a finance manager at a Chrysler dealership, and
Okay.
went from selling to finance, and I was like, man, I can't do this anymore. Like there's the stress, and so we took our family, we sold everything, we moved to Mexico, and
Wow.
that's always been kind of in the back of my head, it was always, you know what? If this fails and completely craters and everything goes to shit, I'll just go sell cars again somewhere else. I'll just go sell cars.
That was my outlook in 2016 whenever I left and started the journey. And, everybody asked me how long it was going to take. And I said, well, I don't know. And everybody was like, well, man, what are you going to do if you run out of money? I said, well, I got to just pick up and sell cars somewhere. I can always go sell cars somewhere.
That's it.
And then when I got back from that, I went back to selling cars and, sold cars for a little bit. I was an internet manager for a dealership. And then my wife wanted to go on to the Transamerica Trail. And I said, well, hell, I'd love to do it again. And I want to do it to where I can get to all the high passes. Because when I went the first time, all that stuff was snowed in. I couldn't go over the real high passes. So I told the dealership, I said, hey, I'm not going to be here in September for the month. I can work from the road because it's all internet, but I won't be here. So do I still have a job when I get back? And they said, well, we're just not going to be able to accommodate that. You have to. So I said, okay, well, no problem. So I trained the person to replace me. She had been with me for many years in the car business, and I'd hired her it was her first grown-up job, and she had worked her way worked all the way, with me basically as my assistant. Every dealership that I went to, she was right there and always helped me out. So I made her the new internet manager, and then dipped out. And then in September, took that trip with my wife. And whenever I came back, man, I was like, well, I don't want to go sell cars anymore,
Well, it's hard to go back to that, right? After you've tasted freedom.
So what I did was after that, I went door to door and I sold solar for about 6 months and, made a shit ton of money selling solar. And I said, well, I made enough money to go mess around for 6 months. So I took off for another 6 months and started taking trips and hanging out, and then came back. And after that, I started selling HVAC, sold that for about 6 months.
What's
And then
HVAC?
heating and air.
Okay.
Yeah, so I sold heating and air in South Carolina during the summertime. So that was well, actually during the wintertime on into the summer. So that was really lucrative business. And then went out, messed around, took a couple trips, and then came back. And in the beginning part of 2020, the last thing I did was I sold roofs. And so I chased storms and went door to door selling roofs. And after selling roofs, again, I made enough money where I could, take a few months off. And so we piled into the camper and we left. And since then, I hadn't looked back, man.
Oh man, that's awesome. I love that so much. Like that's kind of the in a nutshell what I don't know if I'd say I'm chasing, but just what I'm trying to live, right? Just that freedom and chasing that almighty dollar all the time is just it's not worth it at the end of the day. Time's too
Yeah, man,
short.
it kind of puts you in a trance, man. And, now that I've been out here, I'm with a bunch of like-minded people. It's amazing because people always say, man, you don't get lonely, you're out there by yourself. And man, I've met so many people in this community, not only the overlanding community, but just the nomadic community between van life and bus life and people in campers and stuff like that. I've met so many people that are doing the same thing that, for the most part, I can generally call and meet somebody somewhere all across the nation, no matter where I'm at or when I'm there. And that's pretty cool, man. So it's very rarely that I get lonely.
Yeah, it's you know, just discovering this kind of overlanding and stuff like that in April and diving into it and stuff like that. Man, what an awesome community it is, though. Everybody is. I mean, I'm sure there's its own, small drama and bullshit attached to everything, like whatever else. But for the most part, everybody's so nice, and it doesn't seem to be agenda driven and politics and all that. Like everybody's just happy to just be exploring and adventuring and just hanging out and just no bullshit, having a good time.
Yeah, and for the most part, that's kind of what you find. You do find, your kind of niche group of people that, I kind of make that video making fun of. But, for the most part, even those people, whenever you come across them, they might be a little uptight, but they're still really cool people. And it's like that in, like you said, in anything that you do. But yeah, for the most part, man, I've met some of the most amazing people, and one commonality that I've found in this lifestyle, particularly the full-time nomad lifestyle, more so than the overland lifestyle, is that sense that the almighty dollar just isn't everything, and we'd rather go out here and experience life while we can versus go and try to make as much money to have the next best thing.
Well, that's it, man. Like I have a 5-year-old and a 1-year-old that are coming with us, and that's kind of my biggest thing for them is to give them that adventure and to show them the things that the almighty dollar has kind of dragged us away from.
Yeah.
Put us in these four walls in a house, and I'm at work all day, and it's I want what little Timmy next door has, kind of shit. And I'm like, no, like I want to go adventure. I want to be outside. I want to show you the world.
Yeah, that's it, man. And everybody's got their own way of doing it. I've talked to people that, a lot of people work online. I've talked to, people that do seasonal jobs. I've talked to people that
Sell their
trust
feet.
fund babies. Everything, content creation, the affiliate deal. Everybody's got something different that they do, and it just affords them to be able to do it. But one thing that I've found is most folks that are out here and they're doing it full time, they find that their expenses are so low that they don't have to spend as much time working.
Well, I think I was talking with my grandmother about that the other day. But when you have a house, the mortgage of a house, two cars in the house, insurances, and just having a stocked fridge because you're just bored and hungry, kind of shit. Like it when you drop it down to, just in the Forerunner with a small fridge, your cooktop, it's a much different bill at the end of the day. And in terms of fuel, fuel is fuel. You're going to pay it whether you're driving back and forth to work or you're driving to the next campsite, right?
Yeah, pretty much. And I'd say that's probably the largest expense is fuel, and depending on where I travel to and what I do. So like after I leave, I'm waiting on a shipment to come in to northern Colorado, and it'll probably be shipped out next week. But once I do that, then I'll, take that Colorado backcountry discovery route. And once I get to the end of Colorado and the south side, I'll end up going to New Mexico. And in New Mexico, there's a van life gathering there in mid-October. So, what I find is just kind of chasing those events and traveling around. That's where the biggest expense comes in, is that fuel. I factored it in, I want to say in 2020, I think it was. It might have been 2021. I can't remember. But I factored it in to where I'd spent 25 grand that year in just fuel. But in that year, that year I had crisscrossed the U.S. 4 times.
Jesus.
So, it just kind of varies on if you do a lot of traveling. A lot of people, like I've met some people that are full time out here, and what they do is they stay in different regions. And if you stay in those different regions, a lot of times you'll do good. And then I've met people, man, that they'll spend months at a time in one area. I know a girl that stays in a school bus outside of Phoenix, and she stays outside of Phoenix pretty much 6 months of the year until it just gets too hot, and then she goes back up to Oregon where she's from. So, her fuel expenditure is a whole lot lower than mine because she's just staying in that one spot.
So, like the spot you're at, well, I guess the spot you're at now is like you don't really have a set time frame of where you're staying, like how long you're going to be there. Like right now, you're waiting for the shipment. So if the shipment comes in tomorrow, then you're packing up and making tracks.
Yeah, man. To the aggravation of many around me, I make zero plans. And it's like yesterday. I just came across this spot yesterday. Like I had no idea this is where I was going to go. I dropped my wife off at the airport yesterday morning, or excuse me, the day before, Wednesday. And that's another thing. You lose track of days whenever you're out here. But on Wednesday, I dropped her off early in the morning at the airport in Denver, and went and kind of messed around in Denver for a little while. I've been looking for a spot. I need to build some drawers in the back. I had a platform for a little while, but it broke. And so I need to build some drawers in the back. And I had a company that was supposed to build them last year, and then at the beginning of this year, and it just kind of fell through. So I've been looking for a spot to do that. And of course, living out here, I don't have all my tools with me. So it's pretty tough. And you'll find these places called maker spaces where they'll have all these tools, and you can just go there and basically rent it out for the month, or pay a membership and come in and do whatever you need to do. But I went and checked out a few of those, and they all want you to take these classes. And I was like, well, I can't take the classes, and I want to go do this BDR. So I guess I'll go head up to Wyoming, and then make my way west to get to the BDR where it starts, and just go from there. And so I came up to this area, and originally I was going to camp outside of the west side of Laramie. And I found this little area, which is just to the west of Cheyenne and between Cheyenne and Laramie. It's a nice area, man. And
how'd you find it?
I believe this. So I do a combination of pretty much all the different utilities that are available. So I use Gaia that's just like having a paper map. Gaia is, and I use that to see where the national forests are. And then within the national forest, typically what I'll do is I'll look at the MVUM routes, and I'll just go explore through some of the MVUM routes. And along those MVUM routes, you'll find campsites a lot of times. Another thing you can do is there's apps out there like Onyx, I think, shows some camping. There's another one called Trails Off Road. that will show some camping. It's more geared towards showing you off-road trails, though. And then there's another app called iOverlander.
Yep.
That'll show you some campsites. And then a website called freecampsites.net. And what I'll do is I'll kind of glance over all of those and just kind of see what looks the best. Or I'll find, if you go on iOverlander and you can find kind of a high concentration of campsites in an area, then you can pretty much bet that you can go to that area and just kind of search around and you'll find campsites.
So like the
but with me, with my rig, I can go just about anywhere and everywhere that I want to go. And so I'll just go explore. And sometimes I find some of the prettiest sites that way.
So site-wise, can you just basically find anywhere on Crown land and just park it and camp it? Or do you have to find like a designated place to camp, essentially? Like, how's it work?
So each spot's different. You have different types of public land. You've got BLM land. You've got BLM land, then you got National Forest land. Both of those areas, you can typically, anytime you find a fire ring, you can camp there. But again, with my rig, the way that it is, a lot of times, as long as you're not disrupting the area and you're so many feet off of the trail and so many feet away from a waterway, then then you're okay to set up camp as long as you don't destroy the area and as long as there's not signs. In some places, there's signs that are posted like you can only camp in designated camping spaces. But all of those places you have to leave, I think, unless otherwise posted, you have to leave at least 14 days. It's a 14-day limit.
So,
which I've never stayed at I've never stayed at a spot for that long. So,
so if you could tomorrow go anywhere without zero time constraints or whatever else, what's the one spot that it's the spot that comes to mind right away? You're like, that's where I want to go tomorrow at the snap of a finger.
I get asked that question a lot, man, and it's so hard to answer because that's literally what I do. Is just get up and go wherever I want to go, But there is time constraints typically. So, right now, like I told you, I've got to deal with shipping is one of the absolute worst situations whenever you're out here. And the reason is just because, there's no mailbox. I've got no address. And it's real hard to get any kind of shipments anywhere. So 9 times out of 10, if I'm time constrained on something, it's typically because I'm waiting on some sort of a shipment. And the shipment for example, this shipment that I'm waiting on is tires. I'm waiting on 5 new tires to come in. And the reason I'm getting the tires is because I've agreed to do content for that company. So this is kind of my job, right? That's, so I get the tires and then I've got to create content for it. Well, now I'm obligated to sit around and wait for those shipments. Well, now, and while we were texting or while we're talking back and forth, I just saw a text come through that was an answer to a message that I sent yesterday. And now it looks like I'm going to end up going all the way back out to the East Coast, So the stuff's
tires?
so fluid. And No. I'm getting the tires probably next week. But there's a expo show the beginning of October in Expo East in Virginia. And one of the companies that I work with, I'd asked them if they wanted me to go and work with them at that show. I didn't know. And he said that, yes, that's the plan. So now that changes the entire Colorado backcountry discovery route plan and everything, because now I'm going to end up having to find some place to put the truck. I'm going to have to fly out if I don't drive out. If I drive out, then you're talking, a 3-day journey to get out to Virginia. So the stuff changes so fast, man. And it's so fluid that I get up and I do whatever I want to do. But then at the same time, I do get these crazy time constraints for different things that I have going on. One of my main goals, though, is I want to get down to Baja. I've been wanting to go to Baja, man, for many years. I was trying to go last year. I didn't get to go last year because I didn't get my passport. I still haven't got my passport this year, so I'm still waiting to do that. I've got all the paperwork filled out, but again, that goes back to, my birth certificate's all the way out in South Carolina. So I got to find a way to get my birth certificate, get my picture, get all that documents, and then get it all sent out together, and then be in a spot where I can receive the passport. So the logistical nightmares is really my only restraint that I have whenever it comes to living out here full time.
Yeah, we're currently renewing my passport, my 5-year-old's passport, and trying to get our 1-year-old's passport, who was born in Mexico. So now we got to mess around with translating his birth
Oh, wow.
certificate and citizenship on the Canadian side of things. And yeah, that's so I can only imagine when you have one thing on one side of the country and the other side of the country, you're on the other side. Like, yeah, it'd be a huge pain. So
So are
how?
you a Canadian native?
Yeah, so myself, my wife, and then our 5-year-old, we were born in Canada, and then when we up and sold everything, we were a month pregnant, and we had never been to Mexico, and we're like, you know what, fuck this, everything's going crazy right now, and we hoofed it on a plane within, I came home October 30th. I was like, you want to move to Mexico? And my wife's like, yeah, okay, let's do it. And then 3 weeks later, we're on a plane, and
That's awesome.
we're like, let's go discover Mexico. That's kind of what sparked fast forward like a year and a half later, our son was 1, and we're like, okay, well, Mexico is going to forever be an option, but like, I want to see, an addiction almost to this now. Like, I want to go adventure. I want to get into a not a difficult situation, but like a new situation, a challenging situation, and let's just go adventure and see the world and get out of try to escape that matrix even more, and just live our lives as much as we can. And I feel like at the same time we can hopefully inspire some families that have never that are like, we can't travel because we have kids, or we can't do this because we've never done it before. Well, we have 2 kids, we've never gone camping before, and we're gonna try to live in a Gladiator for 2 years. So we'll make
That's
everybody
funny.
else
So
some
my
steak.
first trip on the Transamerica Trail, that's basically how it was. I'd never been camping before, and I had done a little bit of off-roading, and other than that, I just watched a bunch of off-roading online and on TV, and knew I wanted to go off-road, and that was the primary drive. And then whenever I found out that there was a hobby of basically off-roading from one place to the next, I was like, wow, that's awesome. And and that's how like I came across. And so my first trip videos, it's quite funny to see that progression. I get a lot of people that have watched those real old videos, and then they watch the new videos, and they're like, man, it's crazy to watch how everything's changed. But and along those same lines, it's I find myself, the biggest challenge I find myself getting into now is not having that same dopamine rush that I had back then. I was explaining to a guy, I think I was in North Carolina, and I was camping on a lake in the mountains of North Carolina, and it was really pretty. And this guy he was camped up above me, and had come down and was kind of trying to figure out if I was the guy that he had followed on YouTube and stuff like that. And so we ended up talking, and he had just sold off he got laid off from his job or fired from his job or something, and he sold off everything that he owned, and he was traveling full-time to Colorado. And we were talking, and it was the next morning we were sitting there talking, and I was like, well, the real problem that I'm having now is that I just don't get excited like I used to. And he was like, well, what do you mean? How can you not get excited? And I said, well, for example, and I pointed across the lake, there was like a 3.5 foot crane that was sitting there, like bird crane that was sitting there. And I was like that bird over there, that bird is crazy, and at one time I'd have been really fascinated by that bird. And he looked over, and of course he was like, oh, wow, man, that is a really crazy bird. And I said, what's crazier is here in a couple minutes, that bird is going to make a sound like you've never heard before. And it's going to sound like a dinosaur. And it's just the craziest noise you've ever heard. And I said, but I already know that bird's there, and I already know that bird's going to make that noise. So anymore, it doesn't really it doesn't really affect me the way that it used to. And sure enough, that bird made that god awful noise, whatever that noise that particular bird makes, and it blew him away, you know. And I was like, that's the kind of stuff that, you know, now that I've been out here for so long doing that, it's just kind of normal stuff, you know. And so now I find myself trying to find more and more stuff, and that's why I say I want to get down into like Mexico and into Baja and stuff like that.
I always called that either the fireworks scenario or the strip club scenario. It's
Yeah.
always amazing the first time you go, and then after that, it's kind of, well, I've seen it,
Yep.
been there, done that. But
Exactly.
so, have you ever had your passport? Like, have you ever gone down into Mexico, kind of thing? Oh, so that's like,
No.
nor have you been into Canada.
I've never been to any other country, and up
Oh,
until
man.
2016, I had never left the Southeast.
So, but now, from the sounds of it, you've pretty much been on every road in the U.S.
I've been all over, man. There's still, you know, I haven't been into North or South Dakota much. I haven't done hardly anything in Michigan. Most of your northern states,
Too cold.
Again, I don't like cold weather. Yeah. So most of your northern states I haven't touched on. I was going to go to the Pacific Northwest this year, but the time didn't work out. So after this last show was in August, and the plan was I was going to go up to the uppermost corner of Washington at the Canada border. And there's actually there's a Washington BDR, and then that leads into the Oregon BDR, and then that leads into, I think, the Idaho BDR. And you can actually make your way from those BDRs all the way from the Canada border all the way down to the Mexican border. And so that's what I was going to do. And I still plan on doing that, but it'll have to be next year because I ain't doing it in the cold.
Oh, man. But yeah, like now I'm hoping you get your passport, because I'd love to see kind of where you make your way into Mexico and the Baja area, because that's so we want to go. Our original plan was we're in Alberta now, from Alberta to Alaska, down into BC, across the east, from west to east, and then down to Florida, back up to Michigan, and kind of zigzag through the U.S. and then enter into Mexico and go do Baja and stuff like that. So but now I think we might just head straight down to California, because it is getting cold, and then
Yeah.
California to Florida, back up to Canada, to Alaska in the summertime, and then head down to
So
to
that's
Mexico.
from California to Florida trip. I did that trip last year, and that's a pretty trip, man. That's a really neat trip. Just kind of riding along Interstate 10 there and riding along the border and all that stuff is pretty neat.
There's got to be some cool stuff to see on that trip for sure.
Yeah, there is. You know, most of your really cool, spectacular stuff, though, is kind of situated right here in this Four Corners area of Colorado, Arizona, Utah, and New Mexico.
Just like scenery wise?
Yeah. Yeah, because you can travel, even in this spot here, I could travel 3 hours within any direction, and I could find totally different landscapes. So if I go 3 hours east, then I'll find nothing but plains and grasslands and stuff like that. 3 hours west will be, you know, really dramatic mountains and some red rocks, different things like that, like you find in Utah. 3 hours south is kind of the same thing. You get some dramatic mountains and different things like that. 3 hours north, you'll get into a little bit more grasslands and prairie lands and things like that. Not as many drastic mountains or so, but yeah, it's this whole little area here. That's why I've kind of concentrated a good portion of my time in this area over the past 2 years.
And like, how do you find your situational awareness? Like, do you ever find like you feel like, this is a little sketchy, I'm going to move around, or are you typically kind of feeling pretty safe and all right to be where you are?
For the most part, I feel pretty safe, and you know, my situational awareness is pretty on point. I've always had kind of a good read about my general idea and area and stuff. But man, I'll tell you, for the most part, you come across the world is filled with far less assholes than everybody would have you believe. Everybody out here, for the most part, is pretty nice. I've come across some areas where you get some sketchy neighbors, and either I'll move or I just won't stay there.
Yeah.
But for the most part, man, everything's real cool. Like right now, I've been the only person out here for the past 2 days, but it's Friday now. So now that it's Friday, I call them the civilians, the people that are still kind of trapped in that rat race. They come out here so that way they can go camping for the weekend. And a lot of times what I'll find, depending on where I'm at, for example, I was in a spot one time on like a Friday afternoon, and I needed to kind of get going and moving on down the road, and or it was like a Friday morning, and some people came up into the spot, and man, in order to get to the spot, the guy had to been traveling up this road for a while, and it's a pretty gnarly little road. Beautiful campsite, is right on the edge, and but it was Friday, so he was and he was up. This was in Flagstaff. It was about 2 hours away from Phoenix, and he was up with his wife or fiance from Phoenix, and they were looking for a spot to camp. And I was like, man, I've been in this campsite for almost a week now, and I got to leave anyway, so you guys can have this campsite. So I kind of try to respect the people that or the weekend folks. If I got a really pretty campsite and I need to get on moving anyway. So like I said, this little small truck, man, I camped in everything from some of the prettiest, up at the very tip top of mountains on the edge of cliffs, all the way down to the Walmart parking lots and truck stops and bar parking lots. So to me, I can go anywhere. It doesn't really matter to me. But these people, they've set out there an entire weekend.
Yeah, I feel you. That's a pretty that's definitely a pretty nice and I'm sure appreciated move on your part for
Yeah.
sure from them who, yeah, like you said, that's they're working all week for that weekend trip.
Yeah, man.
So what would be a piece of advice that you would have for I feel like this question is like, well, what's a piece of advice for our viewers? But realistically, what's a piece of advice for me? Because I'm the one that's trying to take all the advice in because I've never done this. So what would be like a, you know, you know, something that you live by or that you do that's kind of a must on all your adventures?
Yeah, so the number one thing is just be open to anything, man. And don't be so steadfast and hard set in your plans to where you'll find that if you are that way, you end up missing many, many opportunities. And this is probably one of the main reasons that I don't make any plans is because I don't have any plans. The opportunity to, go out to the East Coast and work that show for a few days with a bunch of people and be in a really cool situation that came up because I didn't have any plans. Another thing that came up is I'm hosting a video for a van life gathering down in New Mexico, and the van life gathering in itself would be fun as hell to go to, and the fact that I get to host a video and go to the thing and be part of it is even better. And if I'd had some kind of crazy ass plans involved, then I wouldn't be able to do that. And so I always tell people, just be open-minded, man. And one of the things I like to go by is I'm kind of like a leaf, man. I just kind of float along, and wherever I go, and that's why I don't set any, hard set plans. People always ask me, what I'm going to do in the winter or what I'm going to do in the summer or this, that, and the other. And dude, I have no clue. I don't know what I'm doing tomorrow, much less, any length of time away. So just be open-minded to any of the situations that you come across, be open-minded to any of the opportunities that come your way, anything like that. And then the other thing I'd say is particularly whenever you're on a big trip and you've got an end goal, so whenever I go on a trip is what I'd call it, because I feel like I'm on one big trip already. But whenever I'm on a trip to me is something with that end goal. So that BDR is going to be a trip for me. The end goal being, the border of Colorado and New Mexico, or Colorado and Arizona, I think is where it ends up. And I say, don't be so focused on getting to the end that you miss everything in between. So my first trip on the Transamerica Trail, it took me 20 days to complete it from east to west. And after doing it, one of my biggest regrets was I did it too fast. Like, I wish I would have stayed in different areas and explored different areas for longer lengths of time, instead of, just hurry up. Let's get on to the next place. Let's get on to the next place. Let's get on. I got to hurry up and get done with this trail. And I did spend some time in some places, like, I'd stopped in Moab for about 3 days. I spent about 3 days in Moab because that was one of the highlights of my trip. I definitely wanted to go out to, that's like 4x4 Mecca.
Yeah.
And so I'd spent some extra days there, and then went down once I was done with the Transamerica Trail, went down the 101 and the Pacific Coast Highway and all that. And had I could have spent a little bit more time there, and then Mojave Desert on the Mojave Trail, and spent some more. If I would have spent some more time there, I wouldn't have been upset. So just kind of slow down and don't be in such a rush that you miss things in the middle.
No, and I think that's definitely something that I want to try to do, especially because we have no time frame, we have no set schedule, and like you said, like, I definitely want to try to enjoy every moment of it, and as much as you can with two crazy ass kids. But no,
Yeah,
that's
it's gonna be tough, man. In the Gladiator, are you pulling a trailer or anything, or what?
no.
That's gonna be tough. Just a tent?
Yeah, just I wanted to get like a like the canopy wedge, kind of like GFC Gaia type of thing,
Yep.
and the lead times on it are just brutal. And then the fact that most of them are about 15 grand, 20 grand Canadian. But we have a rooftop tent, and I think I'm just going to kind of get like a rack on the back of it for now, because I want to hit the road as soon as possible. I thought in my head we got back to Canada end of June, and I was like, started planning in April, kinda, and I was like, yeah, we'll get back to Canada end of June. We'll get a Jeep, and then 3 weeks we'll be on the road. Holy Christ, man! It's definitely a trip like this is a lot more than I thought it would be planning wise.
Yeah, and you're going from Argentina, you said, to Canada? Wait, where did you say you're going?
I want to do I wanted to go Alaska, hit every province in Canada, go through every state in the U.S., and then start making our way into Mexico and make our way down to Argentina.
Whew. Oh.
I
know a guy that's trying to hit all 50 states, and he's on year, I think, 2 or 3.
See, and I only have 6 months in the U.S. I got 180 days. So I figured I could do about 3 days camp with about 3 hours of driving between camps, and that would give us our 6 months. Go from Maine all the way down to Florida, back up to Michigan, Washington, to the middle, down to like Louisiana, and then Texas, up to Colorado, and then down to Arizona would give us 1 night minimum in every state. Was the what I hoped, but shit changes, and I don't want to put too much of a plan to it. I just want to go. I just want to hit the road, man. That's all I want to do right now. I just get our passports right now, and then start burning some rubber. But okay, I'm gonna ask you one last question, and then I will let you get back to your day, because when I started these things, I wanted to keep them at 20 minutes. So I've completely failed that on every single one that I've done so far. But I know that you rock the coffee in the Stanley. How do you take your coffee in the morning?
So when I drink my coffee, what do you mean? How do I take it?
Like, are you? My wife puts cream in it, which I call it her milkshake, my milk, cream and sugar, black honey sweetener. Yep. How do you make it? Do you put ice in it?
So I make it. The most important part about it is I put it in this cup, and the reason I put it in this cup is because it's got no lid to it.
Okay, so it cools down better.
Nope. So it forces me to sit in one place and enjoy the cup of coffee.
That's
So
fair.
I get to sit around, enjoy the cup of coffee, and it usually ends up being about 3 cups of coffee in the Stanley there. And I try to drink it with heavy whipping cream, the
Okay.
splash of heavy whipping cream, but you can't keep heavy whipping cream out on the trail because it turns into whipped cream after getting
Yeah.
shook up. So I ended up keeping half and half and honey. And
Okay.
that's how I keep it.
Half and half with some honey, 3 cups of coffee, and the no lid requires you to take a full blown pause and just.
Yeah, it requires me to sit and reflect and, get all the happy stuff within you for the day.
And okay, I know I said that was the last question, but I have one last question because just out of pure curiosity, was it for the video or do you legitimately just rock uh, truck tire sandals with paracord?
Truck tire sandals and paracord all day. The only reason I'm not doing it right now, I've got a different set of kind of unique shoes on right now, but it's too cold. I can't do the sandals. But yeah, truck sandals. I call those my Air Jesuses, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, the Air Jesuses. Oh, yes.
Yeah, I pulled up with them. So when I pulled up yesterday, I had them on, or the day before, I had them on. So yeah, I'm a big fan of barefoot shoes, and just being barefoot as much as possible, just because I think your feet work out better that way. I broke my ankle years ago, and ever since then, I've had kind of feet problems.
Yeah.
And I dug into it a couple years back, and I found a whole rabbit hole on foot shoes and barefoot feet, and how the sneaker industry's destroyed our feet and all this other stuff. And
Yeah.
so yeah, here we are.
We've been living on our little acreage area here for the last 2 months or so, and I've definitely been more barefoot in the grass than I've wore shoes, and it feels amazing.
Yeah, absolutely, dude.
All right, Sir William, thank you so much, man. I really appreciate you giving me some time, and I love watching your stuff. And so, Sir William Goes on Instagram and YouTube.
Yep.
Again, man, you are truly inspirational. I love watching your stuff, and definitely always having a good laugh at it. So when we start making our way down there, I'll definitely let you know, and then hopefully we can meet up on the trails.
Yeah, man, keep me up to date. Send me some pictures and all that good stuff, and I'll be happy to answer questions as you have them, because I'm sure you'll have more. But man, the number one thing I tell everybody is don't overthink it. Just get out there and go. And once you start going, everything else will fall into place.
I love it, man. Again, thank you, my friend, and we'll definitely be keeping in touch.
All right, brother. Have a good one.
Hey, you too, man. Take care.